We'll be reviewing the wash process Papua New Guinea from SK Coffee. And there's the cup right there. And SK, based out of St. Paul, Minnesota. And they were originally a suggestion to us by Maddie Tees. So shout out to and thank you to Maddie for the suggestion. I'm currently at the Blue Sparrow Coffee in Denver, Colorado on Blake Street. And when I found out I was going to be visiting Denver, Colorado, I took a look to see what Blue Sparrow was offering as their guest roaster, as they're one of the few rotating multi-roasters in the city of Denver itself. When I saw that they were carrying SK's coffee, it was the perfect opportunity for me to try something from our suggestions recommendations list. So I'm looking forward to discussing SK. And Blue Sparrow, they only had one drip offering today, and it was this Papua New Guinea, which kind of worked out really well because it was the one coffee I was most interested in trying from SK. And this is my first experience with SK ever, and I would describe their roast profile as light medium American. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing the coffee itself. So first initial impressions I had of it was I was expecting something a lot more sweet. I believe the flavor notes they have listed on here were something along the lines of sugarcane, slight bit of a sweeter citrus, and then a savory base. Now from that first couple of impressions I had, it was a little sweeter on the nutty side of things, but the most distinct and noticeable thing for me was in the finish, which came out both spicy, herbal, and earthy as a whole, which is a lot more in line with my previous experiences with Papua New Guinea coffees. So that wasn't too surprising in that aspect, but what was really distinct and noticeable was just how lasting and clear that finish was. So much of that herbal aspect to it, in addition to that earthy aspect. So as a result, the cup did come out a little bit more savory than I think I was expecting, especially for something that they had listed on the slight savory base aspect of their flavor notes. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we were getting. Notes, of course, and we have 3 level 4s, so let's go through those real quick. The spice at a level 4, which I kind of mentioned was the most distinct and noticeable thing from that first impression, especially in what was a really long-lasting finish. So as you see, the finish is also on a level 4, so that in itself was an interesting start to the cup of coffee, and while I was expecting significantly less of the savoriness, it was definitely quite noticeable from those first couple of impressions. So those are my 3 level 4 marks, and I would say the most defining factors and characteristics within this coffee. Bunch of level 3s, let's go through those. So the saltiness. I kind of mentioned that the more sweeter, earthy side of things felt like this nuttiness that was coming from it, and it was slightly sweet, semi-sweet in the nuttiness, so that right there justified the level 3 mark. Citrus level 3, that was by far the most pronounced fruit characteristic within this cup of coffee, and it wasn't the most defined or strong citric aspect to this cup of coffee, but even then it was a little bit more subtle in the background and even a little bit lingering in the finish too, which is where the bitterness at that level 3 comes from. A slight bit of the citric bitterness within the cup of coffee itself, as well as this more savory bitterness, not really coffee bitterness, but kind of going along the lines of that citric aspect in this coffee. Cleanliness level 3. It is a wash-processed coffee, wash-processed Papua New Guinea, so even then it's on the cleaner side of things. However, I think just kind of the more murky, earthy, savory aspect to this cup of coffee prevents it from really hitting that level 4 mark. Other things worth discussing. Let's go to the top of that tasting wheel. Sweetness level 2. It has gotten sweeter as it has cooled down, but even then it's still a little bit more on the tame side of things. As you see right next to it, the acidity is on the lower side of things, level 2. So those two things, I feel like you could get a lot more from this cup of coffee, maybe with some adjustments, maybe with a different sort of brew method. But even then, it just kind of goes to show how tame this cup of coffee was, especially from those initial impressions. Chocolate caramel level 2. That's kind of interesting for me because my previous experiences with Papua New Guineas, those tend to be a little bit more pronounced in these coffees as a whole, so was expecting those might have been a little higher. The florality, it's slight, it's present though, so I see that one at the level 2 mark. And then probably the last thing worth discussing is the body, which also Papua New Guineas I tend to experience a little bit more body from. In addition to that, as a drip offering, I definitely expected a lot more body within the cup of coffee itself, but as mentioned, just felt very light, both in terms of flavor, acidity, as well as body. So that, coupled with the pretty long-lasting earthy, spicy finish to this cup of coffee, made it a little bit more different than I think I had expected going into this. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I always say I look for minimum a level 3 for the sweetness, but I would even prefer a level 4 for the sweetness. This one was a little bit more tame than I was expecting. However, I still want to give it credit for at least being a little bit more unique, because I know that this tasting wheel is going to look unique. A lot of people know that I don't necessarily enjoy the savory, earthy cups of coffee as a whole, but this one, just because of those unique aspects, did make it a little bit more interesting of a drink, complemented by this slight sweetness that I felt had so much potential within the coffee itself. I feel like with some adjustments, this is a cup of coffee that would at the very least captivate my interest, because it just has unique aspects to it, especially in terms of that spice. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to: if you've never had a Papua New Guinea, this one's kind of on the lighter side of things. They can be a little weird and out there at times. This one kind of keeps it within that realm of normalcy. It is kind of a bit of a modern, traditional Papua New Guinea, in the sense that this is what I've experienced from so many Papua New Guineas in the past, but it has a more modern twist to it, as it just feels a little bit better done as a whole. Some complex aspects within the coffee itself, so plenty of positives. I think for the most part, I'll leave this review at that. If you've by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, we'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the wash process Papua New Guinea from SK Coffee, as brewed by Blue Sparrow. Thank you for watching.